Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name's Kit, and this is my world. Thank you very much for joining me. In this episode, I will not be doing a tag. I know, it's a miracle. I've got a proper video in store for you, so please bear with me while I explain. In a very short while, I will be describing to you 11 brand new books which I downloaded onto my Kindle, and I've either started reading or am about to read. And these are books that I have not discussed before, or at least two of them I've mentioned briefly once or twice, but not actually discussed. The rest of them will be completely new. You won't have heard me mention them before. I've had a bit of a bumper book bonanza, hence the title of this video. So I don't know quite what's happened. I've suddenly become a little bit more bookish. I got excited, I got carried away. In the space of a single day, I downloaded, I think, 6 or 8 books, and then shortly thereafter, I downloaded a whole lot more. And I've actually started reading them. I'm enjoying some of them. A couple of them I've finished already. So I will be filling you in on my bumper book bonanza. Now, I know it's not the same as some booktubers who have done hundreds of books, but for me it's quite a thing because, as you know, I have a tendency to reread the same old books ad infinitum, and the effect that's had on my channel has been, as I've become very painfully aware recently, that the answers to my tag questions always seem to be the same old books. And you're sick of it, and I don't blame you. So, for the purposes of keeping my channel fresh and interesting, but also just because I was genuinely inspired, I've added to my library, and if this works, I will continue adding to my library, and so you'll be hearing about lots of new books from me. But before I do all of that, I must take care of a few little items of business. The first one, the obvious one, the elephant in the room, besides myself, is my lack of facial decoration. Yes, I'm kind of lacking in follicular foliage at the moment. I've been trying very, very hard to grow my beard back for you because I don't want to scare you by appearing naked-faced. And so I've been trying, but I don't know whether it's the heat or whether it's the fact that we're currently living through the end of the world. I don't know if I'm the only one that's noticed that. Something's gone wrong with my follicles, and my beard isn't growing back as quickly as I had anticipated. The reason I removed my beard was for a skit for my dear friend Simon from the channel formerly known as BookTube with Simon and Amy. Simon asked me to do a little bit of singing. He wanted me to be in drag, and so I shaved off my beard, put my makeup and wigs on, and did a little bit of drag for Simon. By the way, I should point out I'm not a proper drag queen. I've never been a drag queen. I've never thought of myself in that way. This was just a bit of fun for Simon's video. So the result of that is that I'm a little bit beardless, although I've got something growing back, tuftiness. Anyway, so I apologise for that, but that leads me on to some very sad news. I would just like to discuss, for a moment, if I may, my thoughts about the singing Scot, the tartan Titan, the creative Caledonian, the ginger giant. My good friend Simon, he has cast off his bookmark. He's exited the bookish realm. He's shed his literary presence. He's gone on to a better section of the library. The man in the hat has left the building. In his honour, I hereby don the hat of Hyperbole. I would like to point out that it's currently 32.4 degrees Celsius with 62% humidity, hence my fan rattling away in the background ineffectually. This is going to make me quite hot and sticky, I suspect, so I also apologise for my general disgustingness. But anyway, in honour of my dear friend Simon, who has sadly left BookTube and whose channel is now BookTube with Amy, I'm going to soldier on in my hat of hyperbole and do a video about books. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Oh, it's not a tag. I don't have a question number one. I do have to thank ShelfPossessed. This is an excellent, relatively new channel, a delightful couple who talk about books. They read books together. They discuss books together. They do exactly the same thing that me and my other half do. They read in bed and discuss the books that they're reading. Not on the videos. The videos, they're not in bed. Well, that might be an interesting thing, actually. Anyway, I digress. I was watching one of their videos, and within this one video, while I was still watching it, I was feverishly downloading almost all of the books that they discussed. So anyway, the first book that I downloaded is called The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter, published in 1979. And it's a collection of fairy tales and folk tales. I liked the sound of it. I wasn't particularly excited by the cover, but the way the guys were describing it, it sounded like something interesting and a little bit different from my normal milieu. The next one I downloaded was Haus, spelt Haus. This is by P.J. Vernon, published in 2021, I think, and it's a gay thriller involving a bathhouse. And I've been wanting for a long time to really sink my teeth into more LGBTQIA plus material. I'm a very proud member of that community, and yet I've read nothing from that community. So I wanted to correct that oversight. So yeah, bathhouse looked interesting, and also I've got a kind of a thing about bathhouses. I do like those places, at least theoretically. I've only ever been to one in Egypt. I had a good time. Moving swiftly on, the next one is The Dancing Girls by M.M. Chouinard. I really apologise. I'm going to have a lot of French names that I won't be able to pronounce, and possibly other foreign names. I'm really crap at names, even when they're easy ones, but these are difficult, so I will struggle. I apologise. I really apologise if I mispronounce these people's names. It's so disrespectful. I'm very sorry. Anyway, The Dancing Girls, published in 1977. It's a crime thriller, and I was very attracted to this one because I particularly liked the cover, the nice house with the sort of blue sky, and it's moody and shadowy, and there's a light on in the porch. I can't see it. I'm just looking at my Kindle library, and anyway, I liked the cover design, and I liked the fact that it's a crime thriller, and it's the first in a series of books featuring Detective Joe Fournier. So it's the kind of genre that I enjoy watching in film and television form, and I thought I'd give it a try in book form. The next book is I Go Quiet, I think published in 2019, written and illustrated by David Ouimet. I'm so sorry. Anyway, it's a picture book, and it tells the story of an introverted girl who is struggling to find her place in a noisy world, and it's kind of an autistic-y sort of spectrum-y thing. I think it seems to have touched people in a very particular way that made me think, oh, I'd like to be touched like that. Moving on, the next book is The Maidens, I believe published in 2021. It's by Alex Michaelides. I apologise again. It's a thriller set in Cambridge University. It's a murder mystery, and I really like murder mysteries, again, when they're in film or television form, and so I'm trying to broaden my horizons in the literary world and read some of the genres that I enjoy watching. Moving on, and we now move into the realm of books I downloaded that were inspired by other people. We leave the guys at ShelfPossessed behind, and this next title was inspired by Eric Carl Anderson, and again I will leave a link in the description. This is just one book that I was inspired to download. In Youth is Pleasure by Denton Welch, published in 1945, and this book is set in 1930, and it's the story of a 15-year-old boy on holiday. There's no story, it's just his experiences, his thoughts, his ruminations. The prose is beautiful. It's a very nicely well-written book. It's very easy to read. It flows pleasingly, but very little happens. And honestly, I found it a bit dull. I did read this one. I downloaded it because it sounded intriguing, and I'm very glad I read it. It was intriguing. As I say, it was beautifully written, and kind of interesting. It puts you inside the head of a 15-year-old boy, and you get to experience his thoughts and feelings about the stuff he experiences while on holiday. But it wasn't particularly gripping. It wasn't exciting. It didn't make my socks roll up and down, but I'm very glad to have added this particular notch to my bedpost. That's not the right metaphor, is it? That's wrong. Moving on. The next one was inspired by my friend AJ at AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. And this is Different Seasons by Stephen King, published in 1982. And it's an anthology. I'm sure you've heard of it. Stephen King is very, very popular in BookTube land. But this is the one that includes the stories Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. That's one title. Obviously, the film version is very, very well known. It's considered one of the best films ever made, just titled The Shawshank Redemption. Apt Pupil, which is perhaps a little bit more obscure. I loved the film of Apt Pupil, starring Ian McKellen and the other guy. I'll do something graphical. I'm terrible with names. So I really loved Apt Pupil. And The Body, which of course became Stand By Me, which was my all-time favourite film, or at least it's hard to say that because I love so many films. One of my all-time favourite films, directed by Rob Reiner, and of course starring River Phoenix, Will Wheaton, Corey Feldman, and the other guy. And I love that movie, so it's high time I read the story upon which the film is based, which is The Body. And then the last one in this anthology is The Breathing Method, which I know nothing about. As far as I'm aware, there is no film version of it, and from what I've heard, it's a little bit inferior to the other stories. So I'm curious to start Different Seasons and see if that will finally get me into Stephen King. I've always found it difficult getting into Stephen King's writing. I have tried a few times, so maybe this will be the one. Moving on. The next one was inspired by Amy at BookTube with Amy, and it's The Story of the Eye by Georges Bataille. It was published in 1928, and it's kind of disgusting, vile, gross, shocking, hideous, despicable, awful. It's one of the worst things I've ever read, and I bought it for that very specific reason. I absolutely loved it. I found it delectable because it was so awful. I mean, just shockingly bad. It's very difficult. You see, I would love to read out excerpts from this book. In fact, while I was reading it, I kept turning to my boyfriend and reading excerpts to him. He was trying to read his own book. I kept interrupting because I had to share it with someone because I just couldn't believe the awfulness of it. It's kind of a revered book by academic people. It's a classic, a cult classic, I believe. It's a respected book by a respected author, published in 1928, and yet it's just shocking. And I loved loved it. I want to be shocked. It's so rare that anything shocks me. I'm completely comfortable with almost all aspects of human sexuality and sexual behaviour, sexual deviancy. I don't really mind any of it in terms of reading or stories or film or television or anything. I passionately abhor censorship. I think that artistic and creative people, whichever medium they use to express their creativity, should be allowed to do so completely freely without fear of any sort of censorship or indeed reprisals or attack or anything like that. So this author, Georges Bataille, this guy fully exposes his darkest, most twisted and messed up shit in his head, all sexual stuff, and it's completely vile. As Amy described, and I thought she was exaggerating in her review, but as she described, the characters just keep pissing constantly, all the time, all over themselves, all over each other. They're turned on by the pissing. They love the pissing. There is just pissing throughout the book. Every time anything happens in this book, it's almost immediately followed by or including pissing. Someone dies, well, you've got to piss on them then, and on yourself and on each other, and then do other sick things. I mean, there's a scene in church, in the confessional, where the characters rape and murder a vicar. And then they scoop out one of his eyeballs and the girl inserts his eyeball into her vagina. And then there's more pissing. So the note I made, because I always keep notes that I can refer to because my memory is shot. But the notes I made for this book were simple: piss, eggs and eyeballs with rape and murder on the side. The next book was inspired by my friend Jere at Drawn to Stories. Again, I will leave a link in the description. He hasn't discussed this on his channel, but we were chatting and he mentioned it to me and it seemed like a good idea to download. So I did. I downloaded it as we were chatting. I haven't yet started it, but it's Swordspoint by Ellen Kushner, published in 1987. And it's described as a melodrama of manners. But most importantly for me, it's an LGBT fantasy. And fantasy is my thing. I love fantasy. Fantasy is my comfort zone. But as I mentioned earlier, I have shamefully neglected the LGBT contingent of the literary community. I haven't read any LGBT books. I've tried. I tried to start Maurice. I didn't get on with it. I will go back to it. I haven't DNF'd it. I've just postponed it until I'm in the mood. But I'm still struggling to find some good LGBT material that I can really sink my teeth into, as it were. So this is a fantasy book, but it's LGBT. So Jere suggested that I may find this a really good entry into that sort of thing. It's a cult classic. It's been praised for its characterization and prose. These are all very good selling points. And I also loved the cover. It's a simple cover, but it's the kind of cover that draws me and makes me want to read the book. So Swordspoint by Ellen Kushner, recommended by Jere, and I'm looking forward to starting that probably later this month. The next two books I found all by myself, like a big boy. The first one I've talked about a couple of times. I've mentioned it, but I haven't discussed it in any particular detail. It's The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson, published in 2019. And this book is one that I'm quite a long way into, probably 2/3 of the way through so far. I've been deliberately dragging it out because I'm loving it so much. I don't want it to end. It's not as funny as a lot of his books, although I have frequently disturbed my boyfriend in his reading by bursting out laughing, because Bryson just has a really funny way of putting things, and he finds the funny anecdotal stuff in all these dry academic subjects. This book is, for me, very much akin to his other great work, A Short History of Nearly Everything, which very ambitiously attempted to give the entire history of scientific discovery in every single field of science throughout human history and endeavour, and did it very well, and in a very funny, entertaining, enlightening way. And this book kind of does the same thing, but focusing specifically on the human body and the history of human anatomical discovery, experimentation, medicine in general. So I'm thoroughly enjoying The Body, and when I finish it, I may do a separate review just for that book. Possibly not, because when I reviewed A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, that's the only review I've ever done that had someone actually abuse me in the comments. So I'm going to be a little bit careful, but possibly because I really love this book, possibly I might do a separate video about it. The next book, and the last book on my list, also discovered all by myself like a big boy, is The Devil in the Flesh, which was written by Raymond Radiguet. Raymond Radagast. I'm going to call him Raymond Radagast, in 1923. And I downloaded this book for one reason and one reason only, which is it popped up in my recommendations and there was a lady with a nipple. So I downloaded it due to nipple appeal, and I make no apology for that. I was drawn by the nipple. The nipple called to me. It said, "Buy me. Buy me." So I did. And this book is about a 16-year-old boy who has an affair with a young married woman. And it's apparently very explicit, although I'm 25% into reading it and still waiting for something to happen. It's quite well written. It's one of those books that is revered in literary circles, and I believe the author was even accused of being a genius. I am struggling to find any genius in it. It's quite well written, as I say, and by the way, when I use the word quite, I'm using it in the British sense, which means a little bit, not in the American sense, which means a lot. So it's a little bit well written, but nothing to write home about. But at the time, it was revered as a classic, and everyone worshipped it and worshipped the author and described him as a genius. He sadly died at the age of 20 from consumption, tuberculosis, I believe. But just prior to writing this book, I think in his mid to late teens, he wrote this book, kind of autobiographical, I think, about an affair. And I'm 25% in, and we haven't got to the affair yet. So I'm a little bit disappointed. I was hoping, based on nipplage, I was hoping for something perhaps a little bit raunchier, a little bit racier. But yeah, it's okay. Bring on the sex. Yes, I'm just going to use that as my motto for life in general. Bring on the sex. And on that note, I think I'll call it a day. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you haven't already, you know what to do. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share, comment, do all the good stuff, and I will see you next time. See you later.